The purpose of the special programs on Channel 11 last night and tonight is to focus public attention on crime in Louisville. We hope to stress to you the seriousness of the situation that has prevailed under our local government administrations for 25 years or more. To prove our point, we present to you law violations occurring under present public officials. Please remember they bear equal credit or blame with their predecessors, at the very least, since the end of World War II.
Money was in it for him.
How so?
How so? Well, it's got money out of it.
I mean, how? How did they make money out of your operation?
By me paying them off to run.
Was it a weekly or
Monthly.
a monthly thing?
Monthly bill.
In cash?
In cash money.
How about the politicians? Did they want some too?
The politicians, they would take some money. You have to give it into the headquarters in order to, you know, in order for them to run.
Now you say they'd take some money. Did they really require the money to let you stay open?
Well, now, see, you gave your money to campaign funds.
How did they go about collecting it?
You take it up to headquarters and leave it up there. Like you take it to the Democrat headquarters, like you take it to the Republican headquarters.
Would they call and say, Cleve, we're short of money, we need some cash?
No, they take it up there once a month.
Good evening, I'm James Walker.
I'm Clarence Jones. The man explaining the system, as he knows it, is Cleve White, operator of an after-hours joint on the fringe of Louisville's West End. For a number of years, White's clubs have operated on the other side of the law: bootlegging, gambling, prostitution. In a remarkably candid interview, he will explain the payoff system here and what happens if you don't pay. Last night we showed you that Louisville is an open city, that gambling and prostitution run openly with the knowledge of the police. Using a concealed movie camera at 2 walk-in books where I became a regular customer, we were able to take you inside. We showed you bets being placed and race results coming in. One place we visited was a book behind Colonel's Tavern at 2620 South 3rd Street. You're inside the book now. This film was made in November and December. The book seats about 30 customers. Race results from tracks all over the country come in by telephone. The clerk behind the cage is on the telephone now, receiving results. When he hangs up, he'll call the numbers of winning horses and payoffs at the tracks. Most bookies in Louisville pay track odds as soon as results come in.
Thank you. 7th at New York was 2, 8, and 5. Winner paid $6.40, $3.20, $2.60, $3, $2.80, $5. 5th at Maryland, 4, 5, and 2. Winner paid $15.80, $6.80, $4.40, $6.20, $4.40, $3.80. 6 at Liberty, 4, 1, and 3. Winner paid $10.20, $5.60, $5.40, $7, $5.40, $6.60.
This book has enough business to keep 2 clerks and a doorman employed full-time. When Churchill Downs was running last November, business increased enough to bring in a 3rd clerk. Some days, there were so many customers, they had to bring in folding chairs. The owner of the book, a man called Junior or Junie, rarely comes to the book during betting hours. You're inside another book now, at 1223 Arcade, about 4 blocks west of Churchill Downs. The owner is Leroy Hollis. Hollis has been a bookmaker since he was in his 20s. He's now 50 years old. He's been arrested periodically over the years. He always paid his fine and went right ahead with his bookmaking. This is Jesse James Holthauser. The bettors call him by his nickname, Apple. Apple is Hollis' chief clerk. Later this evening, you'll hear some interesting comments from Apple that I picked up with a concealed tape recorder after this book shut down in early January. Like the first book you saw, Hollis has results coming in constantly by telephone. One of Apple's great talents is his voice.
Here's your betting, man. Sharpen up your punches. Here's your betting. The 7th cup of bark of the night is Marlin now coming up.
Results are posted on the daily scratch sheet. The atmosphere here is very much like a neighborhood tavern. Working men buy a beer in the bar on the corner, then bring it here to drink and make their bets. It all seems very innocent, except that everyone inside, both employees and customers, is very much aware that the entire operation is illegal. For it to run like this, day after day, law enforcement has to be looking the other way. Hollis' book has an added attraction. In one corner, a gin rummy game runs constantly. In just a second now, the camera will switch. There's the game, the cards, and the money. A man named Crockett presides over the game, taking a cut out of each pot for the house. There has been a book at this intersection for more than 25 years.
We also showed you prostitutes hustling customers at Floyd and Market Streets outside Planters Cafe. In this sequence, one of the streetwalkers grabs a passing man by the arm to make her proposition. They walk down the sidewalk toward Market Street. There is a great deal of police activity on this corner. Police cars roll by every 10 or 15 minutes. Sometimes the girls step into a doorway while the cruiser passes. Other times they grin and wave at the cop. The police have to be aware of what is going on. Over the years, police chiefs and politicians of both parties have used arrest statistics to con the public about law enforcement in Louisville. Police Chief C.J. Hyde was asked about gambling penalties.
In the entire time since you've been police in the Louisville Police Department, which I believe is in excess of 25 years.
Soon be 30.
Have you ever known a single person to go to jail?
I've known one.
One person in all your tenure to go to jail for gambling, operating a handbook?
Yes. There may have been more that got sentenced for a shorter term, but the longest term that I know of was 6 months.
A police captain charged that many arrests are deliberately bungled to create arrest statistics, making sure the defendant cannot be punished. He also charged that policemen and politicians take money to protect gambling operations here.
Tonight we will go more deeply into payoffs and the local system. We will explore some of the terrible costs for any community that chooses to be an open city. We will show that gambling in Louisville can be stopped very quickly, that twice in the last 8 months it has been stopped. Once when state ABC agents made local raids last June, and again last month after city officials were tipped about our investigation.
Because they control policemen and politicians, gamblers are very powerful men. This is one of the most powerful gamblers in Louisville. His name is Edwin A. Lefty Erlanger. He is walking from his home to the house next door, which he also owns. This is his headquarters. For the entire South Louisville area, Erlanger is a sort of godfather for gambling. This is a front view of the houses. Erlanger's home, the red brick house at 2219 Dixie Highway, was raided by the police as a gambling joint in 1963. The charges were later thrown out on a technicality. The police had somehow forgotten to put the name and address on the search warrant. The white frame house next door looks like many other homes in this part of town, with a few exceptions. The windows are always covered. And in the back is a secret button, which must be pushed before the door will open if you don't have a key. For most of his adult life, Lefty Erlanger has made no secret of his occupation. He began his gambling career in the 1940s, making book in bars and nightclubs that he owned. In 1950, Erlanger was one of the first men in Louisville to buy a federal gambling stamp. With his federal gambling stamp declaration, he told the world and local law enforcement that he was taking bets at specific locations.
We first began our surveillance of Erlanger last September. His routine and the daily schedules of his associates are so firm that you can almost set your watch by their activities. If Erlanger were afraid of the law, he would be more evasive. The schedule begins early each morning with the arrival of Joseph Thomas. Since the early 1950s, Thomas and Erlanger have taken bets together, been arrested occasionally, and purchased federal gambling stamps together. Thomas always parks in the same place and then lets himself into the house with a key. The next man to arrive is Benson Murphy in his green and white Pontiac. Murphy has been arrested on gambling charges more than 20 times in the last 20 years. Here he pushes the secret button to let himself in. After he checks into the house, Murphy leaves and drives to a bookie joint behind 2910 South 4th Street. He parks his car in the same spot every day. When he gets out of the car, you will see him carry a sack into the bookie joint, which is down in the basement. Murphy was charged with operating a handbook at this address on January 7th. The arrest did not affect his routine at all. His car was back in the same slot the very next day.
The last man to arrive at Lefty Erlanger's house each morning is Fred J. Schultz. Before he comes to Erlanger's house, he runs another errand. Each day, Schultz waits at Wagner's Pharmacy at 4th and Central for the delivery of the daily scratch sheet. This is a daily sheet that shows every horse running at every racetrack in the country, the jockey, the expected betting odds, and the horse's past performance. That's Schultz now at his white Ford. Schultz picks up a handful of scratch sheets when they are delivered to the drugstore, then hurries to Erlanger's house. He takes one scratch sheet inside with him. The rest are in his car, parked in the driveway out front. 10 to 15 minutes after Schultz arrives each morning, the gathering breaks up. That's Erlanger in the black raincoat coming down the stairs now. Erlanger always drives to 4th and Central. He usually goes into Wagner's Pharmacy. In the summertime, the visits are very brief. Erlanger is an ardent golfer. As winter closes in, however, he gives up golf and spends his entire morning at Wagner's Pharmacy. That is Erlanger's white Cadillac parked at 4th and Central. Erlanger sits at one end of the lunch counter in Wagner's Pharmacy, holding court. From time to time, he will use the payphone next to his stool to check in with his employees and ask if there are any messages. And that's Erlanger now crossing the street, entering Wagner's Pharmacy. 4th and Central, across the street from Churchill Downs, has always been the hub of Erlanger's bookmaking activity. One of his 7 1967 federal gambling stamps listed the intersection as one of the addresses where he accepted bets. For one of his rare arrests, city police charged him with taking bets on the sidewalk. They found his pockets stuffed with gambling tickets, money, and his federal gambling stamp. The city charges were filed away.
4th and Central is also a focal point in the daily life of Fred Schultz. He picks the scratch sheets up there, delivers one to Erlanger's headquarters, then comes back. That's Schultz coming out of the drugstore now with the scratch sheets and heading to Uncle Milty's pawn shop. He goes into Uncle Milty's pawn shop carrying a package, drops it off in a back room, and then returns to his car. He's usually in the pawn shop about 30 seconds. We know that Schultz delivers a scratch sheet to each stop on his route. We do not know what was in the packages that we saw him deliver. In September 1964, on this same delivery route, Schultz was stopped for a traffic violation. The arresting officer charged him with possession of gambling paraphernalia. That charge, like most of those placed against Erlanger, was filed away.
Schultz's second stop is the guardhouse at the 4th Street entrance to Churchill Downs. Then he goes on to a private residence on South 3rd Street. From there, he drives to Key Market at South 3rd and Woodlawn. Schultz is about to get out of his car. He will enter the market carrying a package in his hand. In an operation like Erlanger's, with a number of agents spread out over a wide area, the bookkeeping is done at central headquarters to make sure there are no mistakes on the payoffs. Each morning, the agents receive a rundown sheet telling them exactly how much to pay on each winning ticket from the previous day. Schultz carries a package with him into the grocery store. We have followed him inside. He will chat with employees and customers and then go into the rear area where produce is packaged. Because we could not go in that part of the store, we do not know what goes on there. Here he is coming back out now to his car. Schultz's next stop is Wintergurst Drugstore at 5105 South 3rd Street. He is now preparing the package he will carry in. He places a sheet of paper in the center of a newspaper, then folds the newspaper twice. And he has it in his hand. Schultz is so methodical and so precise. His arrival at this drugstore usually varies less than 2 minutes on either side of 10:45 each morning. Here, too, he will leave his newspaper-wrapped package in the rear of the store in the druggist's work area. Schultz stays in the drugstore for only about 2 or 3 minutes, then returns to his car.
Most of his morning trip is now over. From Wintergurst Drugstore, he drives to his home at 1327 Arling Boulevard for an early lunch. Shortly before noon, he will arrive at Turf Package Liquors at Taylor and Arcade. As we showed you last night, there is a very busy walk-in book in a building behind the bar and package stores. This is one of the longest stops on Schultz's route. He stays inside the package store 15 to 20 minutes. One afternoon, we saw Benson Murphy here, sitting in his car, talking to Leroy Hollis, the owner of the book. Schultz then returns to the house next door to Erlanger's home. He spends the afternoon inside with Thomas, the driver of the red and black Chevrolet. Erlanger usually returns shortly after Schultz. During the afternoon, Erlanger will cross back and forth between the two houses. On this particular day, Schultz and Thomas leave. Erlanger's day is ended. Since last September, when we first began watching Erlanger's operation, we have seen 2 variations in his daily routine. Both occurred at the first of the month, the day when, according to sources in the police department, gamblers deliver their monthly payoffs. The first took place on October 1st, a Thursday morning. As Erlanger drove from his house toward Wagner's Pharmacy, police cruiser 320 turned the corner and drove ahead of Erlanger to the Churchill Downs parking lot on Central.
Police car 320 pulled into this Churchill Downs parking lot, and the car stopped right here. A few seconds later, Lefty Erlanger, driving his white Cadillac, also drove into this parking area, and he stopped right here, right beside him. The officer who was driving this car was wearing his police uniform. He got out of this car, walked right over here, leaned up against the side of Erlanger's car, and began talking to him through the window. I was parked about 25 feet from here, close enough to observe their conversation, and they appeared to be having a nice, friendly, casual talk. They talked for about 2 or 3 minutes, and then a third car drove up, and this car pulled right over here. It stopped on the other side of this police car 320. There were 3 men in that car, all wearing civilian clothes. The 2 officers who were sitting in the front seat got out of their car, they walked around here, they stopped here, they leaned up against the side of Erlanger's car and joined the conversation. The 4 men then continued talking for about 10 minutes, after which Erlanger drove off, leaving the 3 officers behind. They then talked for about another 2 or 3 minutes, and then they too left.
The following month, on November 2nd, a Monday, Erlanger made his morning drive to Wagner's Pharmacy, but then he changed his usual procedure. Instead of sitting at the lunch counter inside the drugstore, he stood inside the glass door at the corner, intently peering out at the intersection. About 20 minutes later, a detective car assigned to the city pawn shop detail pulled up and parked in front of Uncle Milty's pawn shop. 2 detectives went into the pawn shop. A third detective stood in front of the hardware store, hidden from my view by the pillar out front. Lefty then hurried out of the drugstore, apparently made contact with the detective behind the pillar, and returned to his car. The detective walked into the pawn shop where the 2 other policemen were waiting. I immediately went to the pawn shop window. All 3 detectives had disappeared into the back room.
The Presidential Crime Commission reported in 1967 that illegal gambling finances almost every aspect of organized crime in the United States. All available data, the Commission reported, indicate that organized crime flourishes only where it has corrupted local officials. Ralph Salerno, a former intelligence expert for the New York City Police Department, was a consultant to the Presidential Crime Commission. We asked him if walk-in books such as those in Louisville can exist without detection by the police.
If it were the kind of operation that you describe, this would be something that would be noticed by a casually observant person. Certainly a trained professional and a police officer on patrol is trained in making observation. I don't believe that it could escape his detection for any serious period of time.
Cleve White, owner of the Key Club at 1015 West Market Street, said it this way.
Can you run a place in Louisville without protection money?
I don't see how.
Why?
You just got to have money there, no, if you violate the law. If you violate the law, you got to pay.
Are the police that sharp? Can they find you as soon as you start violating the law?
Yeah, they can find you.
How long would it take if you set up a new place with gambling and bootlegging?
For them to find you?
For them to find you.
The first night.
And then what would happen?
Well, they just come by, maybe I got a complaint, they come around, look around, see what you're doing. You know.
Would they arrest you the first night?
No, no, no. They're not going to arrest you the first night. They're going to make you, they're going to want you to talk to them, make you come in.
Come into the station?
No, come in to them. And then if you don't come in, then they will arrest you and raid you.
You mean by coming in,
money.
Come across?
Yeah, come across with some dough.
And is there any set rate for this? Do you pay a certain rate for bootlegging, a certain rate for prostitution?
Yeah, it's according to what you're doing. You know, if you're not doing them with just bootlegging, it's not going to hurt you too much. They'll take bootlegging money. But if you're doing bootlegging, gambling, prostitution, everything, then you got to come in good.
And what is coming in good?
I'll run 100 a month for each one of them.
For each policeman?
Yeah, well, not no sergeants and beat police, you know. Sergeant usually get 25, maybe 50.
Is that a month now?
Yeah, a month. And the beat police usually get $5, $10 a piece a car.
Now the beat police, that's the patrolman.
Patrolman, yeah.
The guy who rides around in the cruiser.
Yeah, the guy who rides around in the cruiser.
And the sergeant would get maybe 50 or 100?
No, the sergeant would get maybe 25 or 50.
25 or 50?
Or 50. Lieutenants maybe get 75, 50, or 100. Just according to how it's running, you know, according to how your business is going and what you're doing.
How high up does it go? Does it go past the lieutenants?
Oh, yeah. It goes all the way. It'll go all the way up to a colonel.
Do the colonels come by also?
No, usually the men will take their money too. Yeah.
And
usually the captain will take it by, or maybe the major or somebody come pick it up for him.
What's the highest ranking officer you ever had in your place when you were running illegally?
A major. Yeah, major.
Did he come by to get some money or just to look?
No, he came by to talk, tip me off when something, you know, when it looked like there was going to be some heat.
How does the heat come on and off? Can it be on one day and off the next day?
Yeah.
Who decides the heat?
Well, now, I think it comes down all the way, just like when if you was working over there and you're the captain, major, or colonel or something, and you hear something, well, then you're going to run it on down and, you know, and go out there and tell him to kind of raise up tonight.
Raise up means...
Stop, that the state people are being in town.
When you buy protection, does part of the price include the service to be tipped off?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
When you pay protection, you expect to be tipped?
Yeah, expect you tipped and everything. Well, they will tip you, but to protect their interest, see? Yeah, so they got an interest in the joint.
The interest is just the monthly...
The monthly pay. See, they're your partners.
When a city has open gambling and prostitution, the police cannot help but know about it. Because of this, there is a widespread assumption in Louisville that some policemen take money to look the other way. But in an open city like Louisville, no matter how corrupt, the majority of policemen never take a dime. These men, the honest cops in a corrupt department, are affected in many ways. The public begins to believe that all policemen are on the take. If some take money, then all are suspect. Charles Rogovan was an assistant director for the Presidential Crime Commission. Then President Nixon appointed him to a top post in the Justice Department. Now he heads the new police foundation in Washington, D.C. Its purpose is to find new solutions for law enforcement problems.
Too frequently, the police are made the whipping boys. Corruption in the criminal justice system is not limited to policemen by any means. They're one element. They're an important element. We all know of that and recognize it. But there has been documented corruption amongst judicial officials, prosecutorial officials, and political leadership at all levels. And I think it's terribly important that the public understand the police don't make the laws, particularly in the gambling area. It is the community pressures that often influence how they enforce, and all too often it becomes a no-win ball game.
The honest cop may try, for a while, to do his duty as he sees it. He may raid a bookie joint repeatedly or try to run the prostitutes off his beat. But he soon learns that he is playing one of those no-win ball games that Charles Rogovan talked about. The history of Louisville policemen who tried to shut down gambling on their beats is not very encouraging to a new man. Going back through old news accounts, the story repeats itself again and again. The patrolman who rocks the boat is transferred or disciplined. It happened to Patrolman William Ginnigan in 1946, again to Officer Jesse Taylor in 1952, and it has happened in more recent times. After a while, policemen begin to get the message.
See, look, they'll take one new cop and put him in, let him ride in the car with an old one. And when that's old, if you don't take no money, when this old one get through telling him, he's going to take some, schooling him.
What happens if he doesn't?
They'll blackball him.
And then what?
Oh, nothing, just everybody just stay away from him and watch him.
Last month, after city officials got wind of our investigation, uniformed policemen were told to go out and make arrests every time they saw a gambling violation. Because of their experience, some officers did not believe the order really meant what it said. Police Chief C.J. Hyde made a personal appearance at roll call assemblies in each district.
My particular reason coming here is to erase that idea or the rumor that's going around that if you raid somebody that's engaged in a gambling activity, they should be moved or transferred. And I want to tell you that I don't say that won't be done to you, but if it is, they'll have to move me first.
I don't say that it won't be done to you, but Ralph Salerno, a policeman most of his life, describes what happens to an honest cop who is forced to look the other way.
He actually undergoes a very, very subtle form of castration. He loses his manhood in his own mind. He knows that he's not doing what he would like to do. He knows he's not doing what he has raised his right hand and sworn an oath to do. And he feels something of a traitor to himself. He's a man, if he has a family, he'd like his children to look up to him and be proud of his profession and the way he's discharging the duties of that profession. All this is taken away from him, and it's something he cannot enjoy as part of a very noble profession when he has to go along with a system that calls for him to do something other than what is his sworn duty.
So the message trickles down in an open city. Lay off the books, leave the prostitutes alone. But where does it start? Who decides that there will be an open city? Because that message is so clear, we found it almost impossible to find policemen who would consent to a filmed interview. You can't buck City Hall, they said, and we have families to support. One policeman, Captain John Hampton, did allow an interview. Shortly after it was filmed, Hampton was granted a disability pension. Hampton has political ambitions, but what he told us about the system was confirmed by other, more timid policemen.
These things have gone on for that 25 years, and they're allowed to go on for many reasons. The party receives contributions in money from these operations. The policy is not made by the police department or by the individual police officer, but by the political party. They appoint people who enforce this policy.
Cleve White has run 3 different joints in the last 8 or 9 years. Each was an after-hours drinking spot. In our interview, he frankly admitted that prostitution and gambling took place in his clubs. His operation was very well known in the city, so much so that when a candidate for mayor was discovered to have helped arrange financing for White's club several years ago, the candidate was forced to withdraw from the race. White talks now about the payoff system over the years.
The politicians, they would take some money. You have to give it into the headquarters in order to, you know, in order for them to run.
Now, you say they'd take some money. Did they really require the money to let you stay open?
Well, now, see, you gave your money to campaign funds.
How did they go about collecting it?
You take it up to headquarters and leave it up there. Like you take it to Democrat headquarters, like you take it to Republican headquarters.
Would they call and say, Cleve, we're short of money, we need some cash?
No, they take it up there once a month.
And how was the amount set?
Well, like you set what you ever want to give. You can give $20, $50, $75, $100, whatever you want to give up there.
What happened if you didn't?
Well, you know, they put the heat on you.
That gamblers contribute to political campaigns, and contribute heavily, is an accepted fact of life here. In 1967, a county grand jury reported, "It is common knowledge to the grand jurors that holders of wagering stamps uniformly make contributions in advance of campaigns to both the Republican and Democrat parties." Despite all this, gambling can be shut down in Louisville, and has been twice in the last 8 months. The first time was last June, when state alcoholic beverage control agents made bets at 43 bookie joints and then organized massive raids.
The story of those June ABC raids is important. It underscores the difficulty of conducting a large-scale police operation in a corrupt city. The success of such an operation depends upon security and surprise. In this case, security broke down. The state raids were organized because state ABC officials felt local authorities were unable or unwilling to control gambling in Louisville. The man who ordered the raids was former state ABC Commissioner Shirley Pomerball. Pomerball and ABC Western District Supervisor James Burton talked about the raids. Burton asked that his face not be shown on television because he frequently works undercover investigations.
I think that we got started on it in '69, really, and began to look into the gambling, prostitution, and all areas that surround this type of operation. At first, as far as the licensed premises, which this department is concerned with primarily. And the further we looked, why, the more apparent it became that this encompassed a much greater area than the licensed premises.
In Louisville now?
Right, in Louisville and Jefferson County.
At the beginning of the operation, there was a command post set up in the remote area of the county. The agents were assigned as partners, state police, so you had 2 different agencies involved with each team. No team knew what assignments the other team had received. Their lodging was assigned in remote areas of the county, and some of them even outside of Jefferson County. There was a command post set up to supervise and to coordinate the efforts and to keep tabs and give whatever assistance necessary at all times during the operation.
You felt that this operation, this mission was secure?
Yes, sir.
The 20 undercover agents then fanned out across Louisville. Their orders were to place bets in as many different bookie joints as possible.
We're talking about 43 successful hits, locations.
Now, when you say successful hits, you mean, what did they do? Did they walk in the front door?
Well, they had actually walked in and were able to place bets, yes, sir.
So these were undercover police officers?
Undercover investigators, yes, sir.
Who just walked in off the street, inside of 43 different handbooks, placed bets?
That's correct, sir.
How many bets were placed?
Total of 82 bets.
And over what period?
Over about a 2.5-day period, about 12 hours actually working time.
The undercover agents placed so many bets in such a short time, there were not enough ABC agents to go back and make simultaneous raids.
The result was that we contacted the local authorities for assistance.
And when was this contact made?
The first contact was made around 12 noon on Monday, June the 15th, 1970.
That was the day before the raids then?
Yes, sir.
Now, while this contact was taking place, were your men checking on these 43 handbooks to see if they were still operating or if business was normal?
Yes, we had people out on surveillance.
And what did they find?
It appeared that most places were still operating.
When the police arrived at the various locations, many of them were closed down, and those that were in operation, it appeared that they were expecting the raids. Obviously, there had to be a leak somewhere, and there's no question in my mind but what it had to be through one of the local law enforcement agencies.
By late afternoon on Monday, June 15th, the first phone calls were going out to bookies warning them about the raids. A confidential, highly reliable source told us that some of the calls to the bookies were made from a county official's office. Although there were search warrants for 43 bookie joints where bets had been placed, only 17 people were arrested at the places that were still open on Tuesday morning. And by September, every case had been dismissed. Police Court Judge Neville Tucker ruled that the search warrants were illegal. The State Attorney General, in a legal opinion on the same search warrant technicality, disagreed with Tucker.
Some bookie joints moved to new locations as a result of the raids, which is, for Louisville, a new phenomenon. But most of them simply closed for a few weeks and then went back to business as usual. Shortly after the raids, City Safety Director George Burton told his commanding officers that when they hit bookie joints, they were to arrest every person inside, including all the customers, and seize everything: money, betting slips, telephones. That procedure lasted about a month. Then token arrests were resumed. The city opened up again. The heat was off.
Gambling in Louisville was shut down again in late December, this time much tighter than before. The shutdown came after city officials learned about our investigation, and this is the sequence of events. The week before Christmas, city officials learned that an out-of-town reporter named Jones had been in Louisville for some time. He was making movies of bookie joints, the report said, and investigating the ties between gamblers and policemen. The information was accurate, except that city officials believed our report would be broadcast nationally in middle January. The report caused quite a stir at City Hall. An emergency meeting was called. Other law enforcement officers were contacted to get their suggestions on vice enforcement. Something had to be done before the television report, city officials decided, to defend the city's reputation and their own. Mayor Frank Burke decided to wait until after Christmas to do anything publicly. On Monday after Christmas, without telling Police Chief Hyde, the mayor called a press conference. He announced that he was abolishing the vice squad. The vice squad, the mayor suggested, hadn't been doing a good job.
Our emphasis is upon the involvement of the police officer in the neighborhood and in the community where he works. Therefore, and consistent with those principles, an objective evaluation leads us to the conclusion that a vice squad as such is not the answer to effective enforcement of laws against gambling, bootlegging, prostitution, and similar type offenses. Hence today, effective today, the vice squad in the Louisville Division of Police is discontinued.
Burke's deliberate snub of the police chief made it seem that the mayor was pointing his finger at Hyde for the city's failure to curb gambling and prostitution. Rumors began to circulate immediately that Hyde's days as chief were numbered, that he was being set up as a scapegoat.
The morning after Mayor Burke's press conference, the bookies opened as usual. About 11:30, they closed. The book behind Colonel's Tavern on South 3rd Street was one of the bookie joints I had visited regularly. I arrived in mid-afternoon on December 29th. There were no cars in the parking lot. No answer when I rang the doorbell. Another customer walked up and told me he had placed a bet in the book earlier that morning. I went into Colonel's Tavern and asked a woman who works there what was going on. I was wearing a hidden tape recorder.
They opened up, but they got a call to close up. So I think they were moving down closed.
I wouldn't doubt it.
So I don't know what's this shake-up they got down there, imagine.
How long before you can collect the ticket?
I don't know when they'll be there. They told them to close up and get out, so they did. So you wouldn't want them to get locked up just to pay your ticket?
No, I don't want to get locked up either.
Well, I imagine they're going to stay closed very long. You know, make some kind of arrangement.
Oh, yeah,
get before, you know, pay them all.
I drove immediately to Taylor and Arcade to the other book where we had concentrated our investigation. It, too, was closed. Again, a customer told me he'd been there earlier that morning and placed a bet. They got a call from downtown about 11:30, he said, and closed up. The books remained closed the rest of the week. The books reopened on January 5th, Tuesday. It was a shaky opening. There was no confidence that it was safe to be inside. At Colonel's Tavern, I told Frank, the doorman, I was concerned about the place being raided. That's the chance you take when you bet, he told me. Normally, bookies are much more reassuring to their customers.
The books stayed open 5 days until Saturday, January 9th. Then they closed and have not reopened. The few that tried to reopen were raided by city police. In the meantime, there has been a great deal of ferment at City Hall. Safety Director Burton confided to some close associates outside the department that he and the mayor abolished the vice squad because of recurring reports that the detectives on the squad were accepting payoffs. Police Chief Hyde admitted that he had heard the same reports.
Well, of course, this is a rumor that you always have. And I've observed that it's usually the people that are the most active in enforcement of what some people term as unpopular laws, that they are. But when you're confronted with the proof of it, I have yet to see anyone prove or attempt to prove it in this town during my tenure of office.
The Presidential Crime Commission, in discussing the problem of corruption, said neutralizing local law enforcement is central to organized crime's operations. What can the public do if no one investigates the investigators, the Crime Commission asked, and the political figures are neutralized by their alliance with organized crime?
Commonwealth Attorney Edwin A. Schroering is prosecutor for Jefferson County Criminal Court. He also acts as legal counsel for the county grand jury. Last November, several new allegations of police corruption were taken to the grand jury by ABC Commissioner Shirley Palmerball. Palmerball suggested publicly that corruption was responsible for the security leaks before his June raids and that something was fishy about all the cases being dismissed. When Palmerball went into the grand jury room, he took 2 documents with him. One was this bank statement. We obtained a copy of the same bank statement last summer. There is no indication that a crime was committed. The document does show that City Police Captain George W. Tunstall co-signed a bank note with 2 known gamblers, Foch Karam and Leo Hicks. What happened inside the jury room is secret. In the jury's report, there was no mention of the document or any investigation concerning it. Palmerball also carried into the grand jury room an anonymous letter. The letter was signed a policeman.
In this letter, he stated that there were over 129 handbooks operating in the city, and then went down the line through each district and the vice squad, setting out the amounts of money that are paid off to the various people in the districts and in the vice squad each month. I felt that with the knowledge of what took place with the June raids in Louisville, and the fact that there was a tip-off, very apparent, and with other bits and pieces of information that were available and that we discussed to some extent there before the grand jury that day, that a letter of this type, whether it is anonymous or not, should be looked into.
Well, to your knowledge, did they do this?
Has there been any efforts to...
No, they gave the letter back to me. They didn't even keep it.
What can the public do, the Crime Commission asked, if no one investigates the investigators? Martin Danziger now heads the organized crime section of the Justice Department's Law Enforcement Assistance Administration. He is a former rackets prosecutor. Can a prosecutor sit back and wait for others to bring him proof of corruption?
The prosecutor can never wait. He can never wait, whether it be an organized crime case involving hijacking or loan sharking or gambling, if we're dealing with that dimension. And he certainly cannot wait if he's dealing with the issue of corruption. Because unfortunately in this country we have a tendency of protecting our own. Each state needs some type of operation that's going to assure the integrity of its system. And I think the prosecutor is the pinnacle or focal point of that operation. And here's why. His power allows him, working through the grand jury in most states, to demand the appearance of witnesses. He, working through the grand jury, has the power, or is instrumental in the exercise of the power by the grand jury or others, in securing immunity for witnesses. Since it takes two to do that tango, you cannot have a corrupted without a corruptee, and both are violating a law. That power is essential. The prosecutor must exercise vigorously his role as the supervisor, if you will, of the integrity of the system.
Besides his responsibility in leading grand jury investigations, Schroering presents criminal cases to the jury for indictments and then prosecutes those cases in court. The maximum penalty for bookmaking under Kentucky law exceeds the jurisdiction of Louisville Police Court. If the gambling laws are going to be vigorously enforced, then the Commonwealth Attorney will have to prosecute gamblers. In the 6 years that Schroering has been Commonwealth Attorney, an extremely small percentage of gamblers arrested have been prosecuted by Schroering's office. Last June, the grand jury, with Schroering as its legal advisor, reported, "We do not feel, however, that for a city of this size in a horse racing community, that there is widespread gambling." City police admit to between 200 and 300 separate bookmaking operations in Louisville. Federal law enforcement sources estimate the number at 350.
The third link in the criminal justice chain, after police and prosecutor, is the judge. Most gambling and prostitution cases in Louisville are taken to city police court, where Judge Neville Tucker presides. Tucker is an elected official. He took office last January, and like his predecessors, Tucker has followed the Louisville tradition of rarely finding anybody guilty of gambling. Instead, Judge Tucker lets defendants in gambling cases plead guilty to a less serious charge, disorderly conduct. When he first took office, Judge Tucker fined those who pled guilty to disorderly conduct $50. The June grand jury suggested the fine should be a little steeper. Tucker publicly responded. The courts, he said, would immediately begin a crackdown on gamblers by increasing the disorderly conduct fine to $100. But he forgot to tell his associate judges. They continued to fine gamblers $50 until a reporter noticed. An occasional $50 fine is still levied in gambling cases. Charging a $50 or $100 fine every few months on a gambling operation that takes in thousands of dollars every week says to the public loudly and clearly that the system here allows certain people to break the law without serious consequences. This same point is illustrated in another unrelated incident. Shortly after he took office, Judge Tucker himself was indicted by a federal grand jury for failing to file income tax returns for 3 years. Tucker pleaded no contest and paid a fine. There has been no formal effort within the Bar Association to take action against Tucker's standing, either as a lawyer or a judge.
The system takes care of its own and vice versa. Most of those in critical positions who decide whether widespread gambling can exist have been in the system for a long time. Over the years, when scandals break, public officials announce crackdowns and declare that gambling and prostitution will not be tolerated. 6 months later, they announced the same thing all over again. In April 1953, when he was appointed City Safety Director, Mayor Frank Burke made one of those periodic crackdown announcements. It came in the middle of a scandal involving a policeman who raided handbooks. The officer was transferred to another beat as punishment. 5 months later, in late 1953, Mayor Charles Farnsley reminded Burke of his pledge. He ordered Burke to have police check gambling locations every half hour. In December 1969, the American Social Health Association studied prostitution activity all over the United States. The association ranked Louisville among the 5 worst cities in the nation. When the report was made public, Mayor Burke pledged a new crackdown on prostitution, but very little changed. Commonwealth Attorney Schroering has been in public office 6 years. His chief assistant, Carl Owsley, has held that job for 26 years. Schroering's chief investigator, Thomas Schaus, and another detective who works with Schaus, Harold Tuck, are retired city policemen. Police Chief C.J. Hyde has been on the local force for 30 years. The people haven't changed, and neither has the problem.
If gambling finances politics, as it does in Louisville, and if politicians in turn control the criminal justice system, what does it cost the city? What are the hidden bills that a community must pay to have open gambling and prostitution? The most telling cost is in human lives, especially young policemen.
In my opinion, it disillusions a young police officer or any honest police officer, and you're going to lose him in one or two ways. Either he'll get to the point and not rock the boat, let things stand as they are, or the morale will get bad in the department and this officer will leave.
Newark, New Jersey is probably the nation's most infamous open city. It was in Newark that some of the worst racial violence of the 1960s raged. And it was in Newark last year, after intensive federal investigation, that the mayor, the police chief, and many of the city's top officials were indicted for taking bribes from mafia members. Former Mayor Hugh Adonisio was sentenced to 15 years in prison. Mayor Kenneth Gibson was elected on a reform ticket.
In your opinion, can corruption stay isolated in one part of government? If it's in law enforcement, can it stay there, or does it spread?
I think it has to spread. I don't think it can be isolated. Again, I don't think you can have it unless the officials themselves have been corrupted to some extent. So if they are corrupted, everything that they touch becomes corrupted in some manner, some form.
Can you have a bit of corruption?
I don't believe so. It's like being a little bit pregnant. You see, I don't think you can have a bit of it, but most people in our society think we can. They don't recognize that that's only the top of the iceberg that they see, and that the rest of it goes to the very, very bone, the marrow of our society.
And it may not be the actual taking of bribes. It can be the result of the existence of a political system that says, in effect, if you play the game our way, you will make progress up the line, whatever the objective may be. If it's from prosecutor to judge, or from city councilman to mayor and mayor to governor, whatever it might be. It's not an active, necessarily kind of direct corruption. It's being involved as a participant in a spoil system too frequently that tends to corrupt.
The effects go far beyond the police department, out into the city, spreading until the disease of cynicism infects the entire community.
The cop on the beat is not really regarded as the individual that he is. He is a representative of government, of the municipality he serves, of the higher subdivisions of government, whether it's state or federal. And what actually happens is you begin to destroy public confidence in government's ability to do its job. Their feeling will be that government either does not want to or cannot perform its functions properly. And then again, this takes a small bookmaking operation and makes it something very, very important in the total picture in which it exists. You're destroying confidence in that police officer, in the chief of police, in the city council, in the county commissioners, whatever levels of government are in existence, confidence in all of them is destroyed, and you begin to get an apathetic public which realizes or will begin to feel nothing is on the level, nothing is straight, everybody is a little bit crooked.
The public has recourse. It can point the finger at perhaps the most pervasive aspect of organized criminal activity, that is, its ability to corrupt our political system. And the public then can remove, either through the electoral process or pressure on the appointed official, remove an individual from office. And that's, I think, our only protection. If we stand back and we say, oh no, I will only handle it if it's presented to me, I will not initiate, I will not vigorously take part in the system, then what happens, in fact, is most people do nothing at all.
Good evening. I'm Ed Shadburn, General Manager of WHAS. Federal regulations require that radio and television stations survey their communities to determine the problems and concerns of its citizens. In every survey conducted by WHAS during the past 2 years, the vast majority said that crime and law enforcement worries them most. The people of Louisville and Jefferson County are deeply concerned about crime in their community. The programs presented on WHAS the last 2 nights show the people have much to worry about. Bookie joints, houses of prostitution, and open gambling demonstrate to the syndicate that law enforcement is weak and the door is open. There are those officials who will try to whitewash what has been shown on these programs, just as they have tried to brush off every investigation and grand jury report which has ever approached the problem. And the problem is here, as it has been for years. Regardless of which political party has been in power, Louisville is an open city where vice and corruption and graft flourish. A city such as this can never be great, or for that matter, even a good place in which to live. It's time to change all that. It's time for those honest police officers who have been shamed by their association with corrupt colleagues to step forward and help remove the stigma from the police department. It's time to hear from the people who really care about Louisville and who demand good government led by courageous officials. WHAS pledges to continue its efforts to seek out the truth about what goes on in Louisville. But we need your help. There is one thing which corruption in government and law enforcement cannot overcome. That is exposure. We ask policemen, officials, judges, political leaders, and citizens to help by presenting documented evidence about crime and corruption in Louisville. We will work with you to investigate and develop pertinent information for presentation on the air. These 2 programs are only the beginning. Other follow-through reports will be broadcast. If enough citizens are willing to participate, then the whole picture of our community can be changed. But first, we must want Louisville to change strongly enough to do something about it.
7th at New York was 2, 8, and 5. Winnipeg 640, 320, 260, $3, 280, $5. 5th at Maryland, 4, 5, and 2. Winnipeg 1580, 680, 440. 620, 440, 380. 6 at Liberty, 4, 1, and 3. Winnipeg 1020, 560, 540. $7, 540, 660.
The purpose of the special programs on Channel 11 last night and tonight has been to focus public attention on crime in Louisville. We've stressed to you the seriousness of a situation that has prevailed under our local government administrations for 25 years or more. To prove our point, we've presented to you law violations occurring under present public officials. Please remember, they bear equal credit or blame with their predecessors, at the very least, since the end of World War II.